Hi, hello, I'm back. It's been a while since I've been doing a talking video, but I do hope you have enjoyed my other non-talking videos as well. They are very much a part of my all-over educational transmission. Now, I have received tons of questions about various subjects, and today I decided that the best way to answer some of these is through an explanation of what the concept Pantheism means historically, what it means spiritually, and what it may have meant to the Old Norse people. Let us begin by clarifying completely what Pantheism actually means. It is a complicated concept that it takes some time and contemplation to really understand, and I noticed that several people who have asked questions regarding that concept in some way or another feel a bit confused, and some modern pagans are also perhaps anxious that the concept sort of takes away the reality of the gods. I don't think it does actually, but So I will begin by quoting what Wikipedia has to say about the concept Pantheism at the time of preparing this talk. So I quote, Pantheism is the view that the universe, nature and God are identical. Quote stop. I would say that the concept God here is misleading, as it bases itself on the monotheist Christian, Jewish and Islamic concept only. It could easily be replaced by the divine, by supreme being, by all soul, by great spirit. It's often a goddess, not a god, or any other term used by pantheists. Pantheists thus do not believe, I'm quoting again, quote Wikipedia, pantheists thus do not believe in a personal anthropomorphic god or a creator god in the sense of a deity who crafts the universe, but in a deity which is all. The word pantheism derives from the ancient Greek pan, meaning all, and theos, meaning God. As such, pantheism denotes the idea that God is best seen as a way of relating to the universe. Although there are divergences within pantheism, the central ideas found in almost all versions are the cosmos as an all-encompassing unity and the sacredness of nature. To sum it up, Pantheism is the belief in a living, conscious, divine universe of which every living being is a part. To explain it on an even deeper level, all that exists on any level of reality is an individual manifestation of the great whole, a part of the great experience of the living universe, endless in diversity, yet always the same. The concept usually involves the idea of a source from which all creation springs and to which all creation returns, and all creation is a part of that one unified original source, often seen as a sort of all-soul or universal soul, yet within the living universe, creation takes endlessly different shapes. I will explain this even further, especially regarding the individual gods, but let us first take another peek at what Wikipedia has to say, this time of the history and spread of pantheism. Wikipedia. Many earlier writers, schools of philosophy and religious movements expressed pantheistic ideas. They include some of the pre-Socratics, that would be philosophers living before Socrates, such as Heraclitus and Anaximander. The Stoics were pantheists, beginning with Zeno of Citium and culminating in the emperor-philosopher Marcus Aurelius. During the pre-Christian Roman Empire, Stoicism was one of the three dominant schools of philosophy, along with Epicureanism and Neoplatonism. Right? The early Taoism of Lao Tzu is also pantheistic. It is generally asserted that Hindu religious texts are the oldest known literature that contains pantheistic ideas. In Hindu theology, Brahman is the unchanging, infinite, immanent and transcendent reality which is the divine ground of all things in this universe, and is also the sum total of all that ever is, was or ever shall be. This idea of pantheism is traceable from some of the more ancient Vedas and Upanishads to later Hindu philosophy. All of the Upanishads in one way or another seem to indicate the unity of the world with the Brahman. It further says, this whole universe is Brahman, from Brahman itself to a clod of earth. Good. What Wikipedia completely fails to mention is the role of pantheism within ancient European pagan polytheist religions. It mentions philosophers and philosophical schools that were pantheists without mentioning the role of mystery religions in shaping such philosophical thought. I have talked about mystery religions before, so I shall only sum it up very briefly. Mystery religions flourished in the Hellenic and the later Roman Empire. They were all pantheists, having chosen a particular deity to represent the divine universal soul, and they were all based on secret initiations where great secrets were revealed. The mystery initiates were devout pantheists who believed that all gods and goddesses were diverse expressions of the same supreme being, the source and unifying core of all creation. Those who had been initiated reported of some sort of divine vision of being united with the source, the profound teachings of the mystery religions and their enormous influence on ancient society and philosophy was violently suppressed by the church and are still largely ignored by mainstream education and media. Wikipedia mentions, for example, Marcus Aurelius, the spiritual emperor, without saying a word about Aurelius' involvement in the mystery religions. Aurelius himself was a mystery initiate and described the mystery initiations as one of 3 ways to be certain about the existence of the gods. The 2 other ways are through dreams and miraculous healing. Marcus Aurelius was by no means the only ancient philosopher who embraced the mysteries and was inspired by them in his thought. One of the most famous ones was Socrates himself, who praised the mysteries and described his own initiation and vision at the mystery Temple of Demeter in Eleusis outside of Athens, with the following sublime and secretive words only to be fully understood by other initiates. And this says Socrates, one of our greatest philosophers. There was a time when the rest of the happy band, they saw a beauty shining in brightness. We philosophers following in the train of Zeus, others in company with other gods, and then we saw the beatific vision and were initiated into a mystery which may be called most blessed, celebrated by us in our state of innocence, before we had any experience of evils to come, when we were admitted to the sight of apparitions, innocent and simple, calm and happy, which we saw shining in pure light. Those were the words of Socrates in Plato's Phaedrus 250. Another ancient orator, not exactly a philosopher, but a very famous scholar and politician, the Roman orator we know as Cicero, praised the mysteries of the great goddess Demeter in Eleusis with the following words. Cicero said, "For among the many excellent and indeed divine institutions which your Athens has brought forth and contributed to human life, none, in my opinion, is better than the mysteries. For by their means we have been brought out of our barbarous and savage mode of life, and educated and refined to a state of civilization. And as the rites of the mysteries are called initiations, so in very truth we have learned from them the beginnings of life, and have gained the power not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope." Those were the words of Cicero. The last statement of Cicero, that death was no longer to be feared after one had beheld the secret mysteries of initiation, is confirmed by many other sources, such as the words of the inscription above the entrance to the temple of the great goddess Demeter in Eleusis. It said, Beautiful indeed is the mystery given us by the blessed gods. Death is for mortals no longer an evil, but a blessing. Another philosopher, Plutarch, another mystery initiate as well, described the experience of dying and compared the experience of the soul at death with the experiences of the initiates during a mystery initiation. He said, Plutarch said, "The soul wanders around in tiring circles on scary roads through absolute darkness that lead nowhere, and then, just before the final end to all cruelties, the soul experiences panic, perspiration, and trembling. Then a wonderful light approaches the soul. It is met by clean spheres and fields that welcomes the soul with sacred words and sacred sights. And there the initiate will, now in its most perfect form, free of bondage, wander about, crowned with a laurel, celebrating great festivals with others of sacred pure souls." After such an experience, Plutarch concludes, "The initiate will look at the uninitiated with new eyes and see all their impurity." That's a downside of it. Plutarch was also among the many Greek philosophers who regarded the origin of the mysteries as coming from Egypt. Plutarch said he had seen a mystery temple in Egypt honoring the goddess Neith as the supreme being. The inscription above the goddess temple had said, according to Plutarch, because this temple is lost to us, so we have no way of knowing other than what he said, but it said, "I am everything there is, everything that ever was, and everything that ever will be. No mortal has ever seen beyond my veil." No wonder this goddess was known as the goddess of existence, because her statement and her function is a perfect depiction of the concept of pantheism. She is everything. That the mysteries may have originated in Egypt is possible, since one of the most important mystery religions of the Roman Empire was an imported cult, that of Isis and Osiris, where Isis was called the savior goddess, and her brother and husband Osiris, shattered into many pieces, represented the fate of the individual souls that may be unified through the love of the savior goddess. And she represented the unified also. A 2nd century novel called Metamorphoses by the Greek-Egyptian writer Apuleius, where he through the media of fiction described his own initiation into the mysteries of Isis, beginning with a revelation where Isis shows herself as the true face behind all other deities and the primary mover of all creation. Egypt had, throughout its long history, many traditions of pantheism and several concepts of the divine one and the many. However, the longest lasting and for the most of the time most important center of mystery initiations of Europe was that of the goddess Demeter in Eleusis, sponsored by the Athenian city-state, and the one which most of the old Greek philosophers were involved with. The story of the mother goddess' search for her daughter in the underworld was understood by the initiates as an allegory, a parable for the quest of the initiates towards union with the All-Soul. Demeter herself was celebrated as the supreme being, such as shown in this Orphic poem from Eleusis. It said, and the author is unknown, "O, all nature, queen, mother of all things, untiring mother, exalted, creating, she who tames all, unmentionable, shining, the firstborn who quenches everything, and who brings the light, born of yourself, present everywhere, and all-knowing, you blessed one who makes things grow and rot, Father and Mother of all things, universal worker, you who walk forth in an endless maelstrom, conserving, you who uphold yourself through repeated metamorphoses. I pray to you, give me peace." Thousands of people were initiated at Eleusis every year, for a time period that stretched over 2,000 years. and it was a center of pilgrimage for the whole Mediterranean world for 2000 years. According to the ancient historian Diodorus Siculus, the Mysteries of Demeter were said to have originated at the temple of the great goddess in Knossos in Minoan Crete, which was contemporary with Egypt as an independent superpower. So it would seem that the tendency towards pantheist mysteries may have been widespread even during the Bronze Age and may have been much, much older. So maybe Egypt is not the only source. We know also that the mysteries are mentioned in the Middle East, such as in the Assyrian history of creation dating back to 800 BC at least. There it speaks of the mysteries of Nisaba, otherwise only known to us as the goddess of learning, the inventor of writing, and the patroness of scribes. It said, "In the places where mankind was created, there was Nisaba established. Let the wise teach the mystery to the wise." I do not think we know whether Nisaba, goddess of learning, was identified as a pantheist representation of the All-Soul by her initiate, but she was associated with mysteries, and we do know that such ideas probably existed within the various Middle Eastern cultures of the Bronze Age, and that the priestess and poet Enheduanna of Ur, she's actually the first known poet in the world, who got her poems written down with her name signed on it. Anyway, she identified the goddesses Ishtar and Inanna as the same deity, ruling the motions of the universe and being the greatest among the gods, indeed, to whom all gods must bow, exactly as Isis was describing herself in Apuleius' novel. So we are speaking of an ancient and widespread religious tendency towards pantheism in connection with initiation mysteries here that far precedes the Greek philosophers and which indeed nourished their philosophies. The tendency was also present in ancient India 5,000 years ago and still flourishes in certain Indian traditions to this day. Pantheism is at the heart of many Indian spiritual schools based on the Vedas and also very important in several Bhakti and Tantra traditions, such as those dedicated to Mahadeva Shiva or Mahadeva Vishnu or Mahadevi Shakti, the great goddess. Mahadeva means great god and Mahadevi means great goddess, terms applied by Indian pantheists to this day. So, like with the ancient mystery religions, the pantheist traditions of India emphasize initiation and various yogic or meditative exercises in order to reconnect with the original spiritual source of all being. So, how does pantheism actually work when it comes to the huge number of gods and goddesses and other superpowers within a polytheist society? Do pantheists disregard individual gods and goddesses as not real? No, they do not. As far as I know, they rather incorporate all the individual deities as different possible faces of the unifying whole. All gods and goddesses are respected as such, and any deity may be served as a particular aspect of the one source behind all the masks. It seems that people had a tendency to pick a particular god that suited them, or particular gods that suited them best. A pantheist does not believe in a creator god removed from and outside of his creation or her creation. Yet a pantheist is not an atheist who does not believe in divinity in anything. A pantheist rather believes in the divinity within everything that lives. It is called divine immanence. There will always be different lines of thought about the gods within different traditions, but it is my strongest impression that the definition I'm going to state next is what the pantheists of most of the mystery religions and of the Old Norse tradition believed in. To a pantheist, to say that the individual gods are unreal just because they share the same unifying core is as absurd as saying that we as living individual beings are unreal because we also share the same unifying core. The gods and goddesses and powers are real, and they are immanent in everything and in everyone, united by a common source of origin, the living universe. We are real, and so are the gods, according to the pantheist traditions. But on the ultimate level, we are all the same. Creation is infinite diversity, countless individual expressions of the divine living universe. The great mystery, as far as I've been able to deduce based on my studies and on my personal contemplations, is to know the divine unifying core within ourselves and grow into our divinity through a spiritual union with the All Soul. This was what the pantheist mysteries of salvation were all about. Now that thought is actually very complex, and it takes a huge effort and long spiritual, mental and physical training to understand it truly. It takes a great deal of contemplation and meditation, for example, which was why only those initiated could truly appreciate it. To the initiated, all mythology was an allegory, a parable letting us know the many traps and pitfalls, as well as the promises on the path towards union with the whole. And that is when we come to the subject of Old Norse mythology as it appears in the best source we have available, the Elder Edda. Was there a pantheist tradition, or various pantheist traditions in Old Norse paganism? Was pantheism influential and widespread? Could it even have been central to the cults? Was it connected to initiation mysteries? And if pantheism existed, what deities were usually assigned the position of supreme being? Now, saying that, we have to sort of get rid of the idea of hierarchy. Snorri made the impression that the Norse cosmos was a hierarchy of gods, some more important than the others. In pantheist thought, this hierarchy does not exist. All deities, all powers are equal expressions of the divine whole. Just different expressions of the same core thing. So, but there will always be certain deities that are more unifying than others. And let us begin with the concept of the living, conscious, divine universe. Did such a concept exist in Old Norse mythology? Certainly. We have the god Heimdallr of the Old Norse myths. I translate Heimdall's name as a great world, from the words Heimr, which means world, and Dallr, which means great, dazzling, awesome. So just by his name, we get a strong hint, for Heimdallr, by his very name, seems to be embodying the great, dazzling, awesome divine universe itself. Now, Snorri said the following about Heimdallr. He is called the White Oss, the White God, and he is great and holy. 9 women bore him, all sisters. He is also called Hallinskidi, the sheath of the hall, and Gullintanni, golden tooth, as his teeth are made of gold. His horse is called Gulltoppr, golden top. He lives at Himinbjörgr, the mountain of heaven, near the bridge Bifrost, shivering voice, the bridge between the worlds. He is the watchman of the gods and sits at the end of heaven, guarding the bridge against the mountain giants. He needs less sleep than a bird and can see things 100 miles off, whether it is day or night. He can hear the grass growing on the earth, and he can hear the wool growing on the sheep, and everything else which is louder than that. He owns the horn called the Jallarhorn, the resounding horn, which can be heard throughout all the worlds. Heimdall's sword is called Höfud, that means head of human and animal. About him it has been said, and here Snorri quotes from Grimnismål, the Elder Edda poem. The mountain of heaven it is called, where the great world rules the sanctuaries. The guardian of the gods drinks in the beautiful halls happily the precious mead. And Snorri continues, and he himself said in the Heimdallr Galdr, the spell song of the great world, 9 mothers I have, 9 sisters bore me. Let us have a closer look at the various names and attributes of Heimdallr as listed by Snorri, beginning with his own name. As said, the name, which in its most simple and direct translation just means the great world, already points him out as a strong candidate for the living universe of pantheist traditions. An important aspect of the pantheist understanding of the Supreme Being, or the All-Soul, is that it lives and experiences within the universe and within every living being. It means that the pantheist divine unity hears all and sees all, which is one of the important attributes of Heimdallr mentioned by Snorri. Heimdallr, great world, also creates sound that can be heard in all the worlds. Now, what does this mean? In Norse mythology, there are many worlds within the one universe, many layers of existence. Heimdallr, the great world, reaches them all with his sound. He is also closely connected to the bridge between the worlds, which has a name that indicates sound as well, the shivering voice. In the very first video I made about hidden knowledge in Old Norse myths, I strongly suggested that the world giant Ymir, from Ymir, sound, represented the one single primeval sound of the universe, which was later separated into numerous parts, that is, tunes, which together make up the universe. That is in itself a basic pantheist idea. The importance of sound as a carrier of the physical universe is probably very important in Old Norse mythology, and also recognizable in many other mythologies. In Vedic pantheism, the universe came into existence by the speech of Brahman, and the speech was called Vak, the goddess of speech. Her name, however, means cow. In the Vedas, we see an early version of a theme that repeats itself in later Indian traditions. The male side of the Supreme Being is the silent observer at the core of all movement. The female side of the Supreme Being is the dynamic energy of sound that creates endless variation. Later Indian traditions would deal with this such concept, for example in the image of Shiva, the meditating god who dreams the universe, and Shakti, the dynamic energy of the goddess who creates the dream through motion. The same is found in the Vishnu traditions. Can we speak of a similar concept in Old Norse creation myths? Certainly. Only the orders could seem to be reversed. The Old Norse society was far less patriarchal than the Old Indian, and the first being that appears is the female side, which births, nourishes, and activates the living universe into being. Like both Vak and Shakti, this female side of the Supreme Being seems to represent the dynamic, creative energy of the universe, and like Vak, she is pictured as a great cosmic cow, Audhumbla, abundant brew ingredient. She is the first being to appear on the cosmic scene at the beginning. Her active intake of nourishment from Niflheimr, Mist World, the world of the dead which existed before creation of the present universe, makes her able to nourish the great primeval sound, Ymir, which was born by a female element, the great wave, Alda. Like a wave too does Audhumla's tongue ravish the frozen eyes of death, and so reveal the first conscious being from which conscious, creative, universal intelligence emerges, in the shape of Odin, Vili and Ve, whose names mean spirit, poetry, frenzy, intent, or names for consciousness. Unlike Indian traditions, the male element of universal divinity in Norse myths is not just the passive observer dreamer, but rather the part that not only embodies the physical universe, but which also experiences actively while immanent in the universe, birthed, nourished, and activated by the subtle and hidden female element. This is more akin to the ideas of ancient mystery religions that concentrated on the great goddess and her dying and reincarnating consort or brother. So, how does all this relate to Heimdallr, the great world? The sound element relates them, as do the mothers of Heimdallr. They are 9 in number, which is an important number that requires a lecture of its own, but I think I've touched upon this subject in many videos by now. The important thing here is that these 9 mothers may easily be identified as the 9 daughters of Aegir, which are often referred to as waves and streams. Waves and streams deriving from the world of the dead and from the world of heat, and Audhumla's teats, were important in the creation and nourishment of Ymir, the primeval world giant and the embodiment of cosmic sound. The masculine element, sound, carries the universe and brings it into shape when it is nourished and moved by the female elements, streams and waves. Whereas Heimdallr is called the Great World, Ymir is identified as the body of which the universe was built. Those of you who have read Snorri's Edda or the easier versions available may be a bit surprised at my readiness to identify a god with a giant, when I here identify Ymir, the world giant, with Heimdallr, the great world. Probably because of Snorri's judgment on the giants. Snorri and most of the authors who render easier versions of his stories judge the giants as an evil demonic species. But this is a Christian influence of dividing the world into good versus evil. Not only Christian, sorry, but no, they did change here. And this division of the world into good versus evil is non-existent in the older and more pagan myths found in the Elder Edda. There, the giants, they may be destructive, but they are also the origins of the gods and possessors of great wisdom and knowledge. And the borders between the two species are far from distinct. Heimdallr can also be recognized in another giant figure, Mimir, whose name means remembrance, representing universal memory. Just as Heimdallr drinks the precious mead, and is the owner of the resounding horn that can be heard in every dimension of the universe, so Mimir is the owner of the very same horn, the Jallar horn, the resounding horn, which he uses to drink the mead from the well of memory in which all the experience of the universe is collected. Their being owners of the same great Jallar horn helps to identify the two. Thus, the great world not only sees and hears everything, but also remembers everything. And, like Heimdallr, Mimir is a wise giant that is also a god, one of the Aesir. Heimdallr also shares something else with the giants. He is among the Aesir, but he comes from outside. In the Trimskvida, he is identified as one of the Vanir gods, and the Vanir could very well be identifiable as giants originally. Now, the character called Ymir, the sound, has his counterpart also in Mimir, the rememberer, and also in Skrymir, the great speaker, which further emphasizes the importance of sound as basic to existence. The great speaker Skrymir is by Snorri identified with Utgard's Loki, which means Loki of the outer world, who rules the outer world and who creates great illusions for gods and men. This attribute of creating illusions of limitation and separation, in turn, identifies Loki of the outer world with the giant Vafthrudnir, whose name means the powerful veil, something that hides something. And the powerful veil, so-called halls, has to be entered by Odin, the spirit, who has to explore them at the peril of his life. He actually has to outwit the giant of illusion to survive. And he's the spirit. Snorri also identifies the world giant Aegir, the terrifying one, with Hymir, whose name means hymn, and further emphasizes the importance of sound. In the Hymiskvida, Hymir is the frost giant who owns the one cauldron that may contain all the mead of the world giant Aegir, who fathered the mothers of the universe. Another identification is made by Snorri with Gymir, whose name means the one who hides something. What Gymir hides is revealed in the poem Skirnismál. His daughter Gerdr is what he hides, and she is the source of light, the illuminator of all existence, just like the daughters of Aegir are called the lights of the gods. She is the hidden mystery within the living universe. Now, in order to understand the metaphors offered by Snorri when he described Heimdallr, we have to make an effort to understand the symbolic significance of various terms. One of Heimdall's other names is Hallinskidi, the sheath of the hall. A hall will usually symbolize a sphere in the universe, so it could easily here symbolize the very universe itself. A sheath is something that contains something else, a sword usually. Thus, Heimdallr is the sphere which contains a sword. The sword of Heimdallr is bluntly called the head, which we know is the seat of consciousness. That this is symbolized by a sword brings to mind the sword's capacity for cutting through things and should be understood metaphorically, the mind or the consciousness ability to act and reason. Thus, the sphere that is Heimdallr is what contains consciousness. Knowing that Heimdallr is the great world, this signifies a concept of the living universe containing all the consciousness there is in living beings. A concept strengthened by the image of the rememberer who drinks from the well at the root of the world tree that contains all the memories of everything that ever lived and of the universe itself. Alright, what about heaven? Heaven is a typical ancient term for the greater mysterious universe from which creation sprang, and Heimdallr is certainly connected with heaven, as is shown by him being the guardian of heaven, the guardian of the bridge between the worlds, the various cosmic dimensions, and of his home called the Mountain of Heaven, and of him living at the end of heaven, like his source being. Heimdallr is also associated with gold and brightness. When he is called the white god, this does not refer to his skin color, as some seem to think. Whiteness is the common Norse term for indicating brightness. The great world is bright. If you look at heaven in the day, you will see that this is very much a bright place. If you look at heaven in the night, you see numerous dots of brightness called the stars, and they would appear as white. The Milky Way, our very galaxy, is also recognized by its white brightness. Maybe the ancient knew that the Milky Way was sort of our universe. Another metaphor for divine brightness is the gold with which Heimdallr is associated. No wonder, as his mothers are the very incarnations of the subtle gold in Old Norse myths and seem to represent divine wisdom and illumination. When Heimdallr rides a horse called Gulltopp, the golden top, that brings to mind again the top, the head, the seat of consciousness, and when that is golden, it is illuminated by divine wisdom, and this is what Heimdallr uses for his steed. This is what carries the universe. Now, let us move on to how Heimdallr appears in the Elder Edda. The one and only poem that really explains Heimdallr is found in the revelation of the Hyndlul, the song of the she-wolf. I'm not the first to point this out. In fact, the first time I thought about this was when I read the analysis offered by Gro Steinsland. She's the most highly regarded professor on Old Norse mythology at the University of Oslo, where she leads the Department of Nordic Medieval Studies. And she has written several books, and this book I'm not sure is available in other languages than Norwegian, but if you can find it in your language, it is very much worth the read. I will give the reference in the description. Now, in it, she tries to analyze the Song of the She-Wolf as part of an initiation ritual for kings. I have also analyzed this myth as an initiation story, only I think it's not just for kings, but that is not the subject here. Let's see, the point is this. In the poem, a young man called Ottar worships the goddesses, and Freya appears before him, turns him into the shape of a sacrificial boar, and rides him into Hel, where they meet with an old giantess called Hyndla. Her name means the she-wolf, or just the bitch. She lives in the rock caves and is the perfect image of the goddess of the dead. This somber lady reveals, through an act of oracular divinatory seider, that every being in the universe is in fact connected and related, and finally united in one great being. The climax is reached after a long counting of every mythical and human lineage in the world, stating at every point that they, every lineage in the world, are all your kind, Ottar of the narrow mind. The great mystery is for Ottar of the narrow mind to expand his mind and his feeling of kinship with all the cosmic species and human lineages, as they are all one. Steinsland identifies the unifying being as Heimdallr for many good reasons, mainly because because this being and Heimdallr are born by 9 mothers. And I completely agree, as with any scholar who reads her analysis and who has studied the myths, that the concept of a universal being that unifies everyone and everything that has ever existed is the major theme of the poem, and that the being is recognizable as Heimdallr. Steinsland sees this mainly from the perspective of kingship ideology, where the king sort of is to be identified with the universal being, uniting all his people as one. I'm also sure that this concept was an important part of the Norse kingship ideology, but I think that the meaning goes further, and that we may be speaking of Ottar as an initiate into the great mysteries of Pantheism, where the goal is to connect and unite with the universal being within the individual. And this is what's going to lead him to Valhalla. If Heimdallr and his countless namesakes in the giant world represent the living universe, then what about the world tree Yggdrasil? This is problematic only if one insists on thinking about the world tree as a physical tree and not as a being. The Old Norse people would not have the same problem, as Snorri makes very clear in the Edda. Male trees in poetry always symbolize men, whereas female trees in poetry always symbolize women. This is why the first man and woman are named after trees. Ask the ash and Embla the alder. The first man is indeed called by the very same sort of tree as is usually assigned the world tree. So that the world tree may very well be known as the first man, and that would be Ymir, the first male being. What about Yggdrasil's meaning as the horse of Ygr? Actually, the word drasil means a steed, which is usually a horse, but basically something that carries something else. So what does this steed carry? If you think of the universe as a steed and seeing that it is already said to be a container of consciousness in another metaphor, the Halinskiri, then we understand better why the universe is the steed that carried Ygr. Ygr meaning either the old one or the terrifying one, but is usually thought to indicate Odin, who before any other god seems to embody consciousness itself. Thus, the universe is that which carries consciousness. We could also be talking about another older creature than Odin, namely the giant Aegir, whose name also means the terrifying one, and who is certainly the oldest of all male beings, being the father of the mothers of the present universe. And I think perhaps he is the Odin of a previous world. Seeing as he steers the waves that moves and births the universe, and the winds that draw everything back to the source in death, he could very well be the original image both of the universe and of consciousness. And this leads us to a new discussion, whether the great god Odin could qualify as the supreme being within a pantheist tradition in pagan Scandinavia. In the next video we shall see that he does. For now, we will just have a quick summary. Heimdallr has been identified as the living universe of Old Norse mythology, the one being who unites all lineages of giants, gods and humans alike. His mythology fits perfectly into the pantheist concept of a living conscious universe, a unifying divine core in all existence, and the fact that his unifying power is revealed as the visionary climax of an initiation in the underworld also makes him perfectly into the pattern of a pantheist mystery religion. This subject is extremely big, and I will have to continue in the next video. So have a lovely day or night.